Hey everyone, welcome back. Here we are with the second part of our day 12 project. Prior to this video, you probably should have assembled the project you're going to be working on. I have mine here. I'm going to be working on this 3Z tree, as you can see, where we split the three parts and put them together. To learn how to do that, watch the previous video, part 1 of day 12. If you don't want to do a tree, we also did a diamond shape, and you can check that out there on that video too. So the tools we're going to be using today are as follows. We got a lot here, so gather what you can. I have a black micron PN. A regular black pen will work too. I just happen to be using the PN. I have a brown micron 01. I also have a gold jelly roll. I have a regular graphite pencil, white charcoal pencil, and tortillons for both of those pencils, so they stay clean. I'm going to put those aside a little bit, and I'm going to begin with my graphite pencil here, and I'm going to put a string on this tree here. And the idea behind this project is, and I think I'm going to call it a reticula tree, or a reticula tree. I don't know, maybe we need to play with that a little bit more. Anyway, the idea is sort of a spin-off of the plates that you may or may not have seen floating around the Zentangle world. Well, this one is going to be a tree that kind of is formatted the same way, and we're going to play with all different fragments. Oh, fragment tree! I think it should be a fragment tree. Anyway, so this tree is going to be filled with fragments. It's going to be lovely, and it's going to be a fun project. So here's how we're going to lay out our string. We're just going to put a series of arcs, and you can watch me for a minute to see how I lay mine out. So starting at the top, I'm just going to start with a series of subtle arcs, and they don't have to be perfect. In fact, not perfect is fine with me. Gives it a little bit of flair, so they may not end up exactly in the same spot on each tile. But you're going to kind of meter it out, space them evenly, and just work your way down to the bottom. All right, something like that. If you all decided not to do a tree and you want to do this kind of diamond shape, then you might have something more like that. Okay. Either one would work, and I think you're going to have fabulous results either way. I'm going to work on the tree though, okay? So if you're working on the other one, just follow along the same way. So this is kind of a fun project, and I encourage you to either do exactly what I'm doing or to explore other fragments and reticula. If you're not familiar with the fragment and reticula technique, it was introduced in Rick and Maria's last book, The Primer, and it's just a fun way to play with traditional grid work, non-traditional grid work, and it just opens up a whole new world for patterns and meta patterns, and is fabulously fun. So here we go. The top one will actually only have one space in it, so I'm looking at sort of a triangular fragment to put in there, and I am going to start with my brown pen actually, and I'm simply just going to define the space right here. So maybe I'll zoom in a bit so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to define the space by just tracing over the graphite, and I like to put in these sort of little border lines. So I just put one aura down there to define the space, both in brown. I'm going to put a dot in the middle, and this is sort of a non-traditional triangle because the points are a little awkward, but I'm just going to draw a line to each corner, and then I'm going to, with my brown pen, sort of do like I would for bales. This fragment I think is L16 if you have a primer. I'm going to add a second aura here just for fun. All right. And then I think I'm actually just gonna squeeze a little orb in here. That makes it a little bit different than the original one. And then just kind of defining the little interstices. Just an interesting little top to my tree. All right, I'm gonna work my way down to the second space. I'm gonna work with my black pen this time. And I'm gonna put a tangle in here that's actually one of my favorites. It's called Jongle. I'm gonna set up the space with again a little border here. And I'm gonna put a line down the middle and then one line dividing each of the other halves in half, like so. And Jongle is kind of a sort of a zigzaggy version of Knightsbridge. And I'm gonna begin my Jongle by making these V shapes that land on the stripes. And I'm just going to parallel those V shapes again. So keeping the lines parallel to one another is the trick with Jongle. See how these are all parallel? And then I'm just kind of, these ones are falling off the edge. So that looks kind of cool as is. But now I'm going to ink it in as I would Knightsbridge. Okay, so we have the whole Jongle inked in. And you may or may not have noticed that this paper is a little bit softer than the white, so it takes the ink really intensely and will also remain wet for a little while. So you're gonna wanna be cognizant of that as you are working, so you don't maybe lean your hand upon it, because it will stay saturated for a little bit. So I love to add a real kind of dramatic tangle into my lineup, because I think it just adds to the overall composition. So great tangles for that are like striping and Knightsbridge and Jongle. I think they're kind of whimsical and fun. All right, moving down the line here. I think the next one I'm gonna do is another fragment, and this is U3 in the primer. And I might just show you guys what this looks like so that you know what I'm talking about. But the primer has, let's go back up, has a page like this with all kinds of fragments on it, and it's such a great resource. So I'm going in there and grabbing from that and kind of seeing which fragments I'm going to use. All right, back to here. So I'm going to switch to my brown pen here, and I'm going to once again begin by defining the space. And now I'm gonna divide this strip into squares, and I think I'll do that by maybe I'll do 4 squares here, okay? So I'm gonna do a line down the middle, line down here, line down there. And so I guess they're kind of elongated a little bit, but that's okay, because that'll work well with this particular I'm gonna do, our fragment. So I'm gonna play with U3, which is sort of like this stem with these little leaves falling off, and I'm gonna do it going in one direction on this side and the other direction on the other side. So it starts with this sort of stem like that, and then these sort of petal-like shapes like that, okay? And then I'm going to do this one doing the same thing. And these fragments are all about just figuring out which elements belong in each shape and then repeating them. And they don't have to be exactly the same. And then over here, I'm going to do the same thing. All right, so that adds like a little organic twist to it. So I'm going to go on to the next row, and I've picked another one from the book. This is Q1, and I'm going to lay this one out a little bit different so you can check out how I'm going to do that. I'm just going to once again sort of establish the space I'm working on. I'm going to make this band a little wider because I might put some perfs in there in a minute. And let's see here. I'm going to divide this space up a little bit differently. And instead of just putting one line for the divisions, I'm going to use these kind of bars. So it's just a different way of dividing out the spaces. But I'm still going to do these square-like shapes. That's what's so cool about this system, is you can just make little tweaks and it just changes the whole thing a lot. And I'm using my black pen, but you can really use either color at any point in time. So using that same width for that band, I'm gonna draw diagonal lines going through each one of these spaces. And I'm gonna turn it, and I'm gonna do a diagonal line going in the other direction. And using the hollabaugh approach, I'm gonna go underneath that other one. And if you sort of like the way it looks as is, stopping is always an option. I think sometimes we feel like we have to keep going and going and going, but at any point in time where you're happy with the way things look, you can definitely leave it here. So I was going to do it one way, but because it's a little bit smaller than I thought, I'm actually going to make it a little bit different than Q1. I'm not sure if this one's on here. I'm just sort of inventing it as I go. But I'm going to sort of draw a circle behind the X. Add some ink and a little definition. The other one I was gonna do was really cool, but once I looked at it, I didn't have enough space. So just as we often do in Zentangle, I sort of morphed my plan a little bit. But I think this is pretty cool too. The idea was to get a little bit of black in there just to add definition, because that sort of will make each little row of fragments really pop out and kind of vary from one another. All right, so that's pretty cool. I'm happy with that. So the next one I'm gonna use both black and brown, but first I'm going to do my row of perfs. I think I mentioned that. And you can do this at any point in time on the tree. You can do it more than one time. But this adds just a little flair And I happen to be doing it with my black pen, but either one would work. And now I'm going to define my space with my black pen. And I'm going to once again divide this up into squares. I like to start in the middle and then work out. All right. Now I'm going to just look at one square to get started, and I'm going to go to the middle of the top and the bottom of the space and just create sort of a pod-like shape or a petal, like so. And then I'm going to put little orbs inside there. And I'm going to do that inside each one. Sometimes I like to go back and sort of ink in the negative space. All right, so once you have all those pod-like shapes in there with your black pen, I'm going to switch to my brown pen. I believe this fragment is U2, I think, but you can check it out. And I'm going to go back in and just add some auras all the way to the edge of the space. It's kind of fun sometimes using two different color pens in one fragment. So I like to mix it up a little bit. And just go ahead and add auras to all the fragments. All right, there we go. On to the next one. I'm going to grab my black pen again, and I'm going to put a defining line here. I think I forgot to before. Seems like such a subtle little detail, but I think it adds to it. Kind of separates each one. And you can make them different sizes. This one I did real thin. This one I'm going to make a little thicker. All right. I'm going to do another square reticula here, and I'm going to kind of do it off the one above it so it doesn't look exactly laid out. So I'm kind of purposely putting the lines in different places than the last ones were. And we're gonna do a tangle called Well here. It's also in the primer as a fragment under D4, but it's actually a tangle called Well. And it's a great way to practice your takeoff and land. And here's how it goes. So I think what we're gonna do is fill all these squares with a circle sort of like this. And you can go ahead and do that in all the squares. All right, once you get your circles down, you're gonna want those pretty much right in the middle of those squares. That'll make sense in a minute. And we're gonna play with a takeoff and land technique here, and we're gonna sort of be creating sort of like a number 9. That's how I like to look at it. So I'm gonna sort of like be circling around this center circle and then landing in the corner here. And it's a pretty subtle stroke, and here how it goes. So I almost draw over that circle, and then I end in the corner just like that. And I'm gonna go and do that in the same, I'm not even gonna turn my tile, I'm just gonna go down the row and do that in the same place all the way down the row. Now once we have them done all the way down in that one place, I'm gonna subtly turn my tile, and I'm gonna do the same thing going to another corner. Just like that sort of number 9 shape, subtly landing in the corner, taking off, and landing all the way down the row. All right, I think you guys got the hang of it. Now we're gonna do the third and fourth corners to finish all the way around. All right, cool. So I made my way all the way around. It's very cool shape, and it's that subtle sort of taking off the circle and landing in the corner that creates this beautiful sort of twisting pattern. I think it's quite lovely, actually. I think I'm going to do another layer of orbs right here. All right, we're about halfway down this tree, doing pretty good. And as I said earlier, feel free to follow along with me and maybe just choose which fragments you're enjoying, add your own, do completely all your own. This is a great opportunity to explore different grid patterns and just see what's out there. So I'm expecting to see some really fun fragmentry out there. So I am going to do this next one with both black and brown. And I think I'm going to lay it out with my black pen. Again, it doesn't really matter, so you can switch pens at any point in time. And this one, instead of it being a square reticula, I'm going to do a triangle. So the best way for me to do that is I'm going to start in the middle, and I just simply start by doing a triangle like that. And then I kind of zigzag up to make a series of triangles. And then I just want to divide it a little bit more, so I'm going to go ahead and sort of aura that line. A really fine aura. And this is optional, but I think it just adds another subtle detail when the fragments go in. I'm going to put down my black pen and I'm going to use my brown pen for a minute here. And I'm going to put my tile on its side here. I'm just going to focus on these triangles here, and then I'll flip it and do the others. So I'm just going to simply make an arc on this bottom part here, and then I'm going to aura the arc all the way up. I'm going to do that all the way across and on the other side. Alright, so I did that on both sides, and as you can see, it looks pretty cool as it is. So if you're enjoying that the way it is, then by all means leave it that way. I'm going to add a next step, and I'm going to go in, and inside this arc I'm going to make a tiny little sort of like crescent moon and ink that in kind of on the crack here. Sometimes on the crack you sort of gotta change your angles. And then I'm going to aura that like so. Here, I'll do another one to show you. So it's a little crescent moon, and then aura that. And you're gonna want to do that on both sides. All right. Very cool. So as you can see, I'm trying to sort of skip how the colors go and just add a little definition here and there, and it doesn't have to be exact. So, you know, I used black here and brown there, and just sort of vary it as you go down, using both colors in one row, maybe just one in the next. Just get a nice sort of unexpectedness to it. So the next one I'm gonna use, I think, just brown. So I'm going to define my space, the brown pen, I'm going to do squares in this one. Okay. And this is kind of a a fun fragment here. So I'd like to start in the center so you can see where I'm at. So I'm simply just going to put an X through here. And then I'm going to put a cross through there, but I'm not going to go all the way to the end. I'm going to go about to the midpoints. And then I'm just going to connect that to the points. So you get kind of this little jewel-like diamond. Kind of cool. So you're going to go ahead and do that in all the spaces. Okay, so we're on to the next row. I'm going to use my black to define this one. It looks like it would probably go off the page a little bit, so we'll just kind of figure out how we'll fill those two spaces after. And I'm going to once again divide this into squares. It doesn't really matter where you divide it. I just try to be a little bit inconsistent so that they all don't match up, so that the lines are in different places. To me, that's a little more interesting, but you may like them all lined up. Either way is fine. All right, so this next one is F2, and I'm going to alternate which direction it's facing. So I like to start in the middle so you can see clearly, and it's sort of like a little bit of a arced line going through the center. It has a little bit of curved edges. I like to add some character like that because these lines are just subtly curved up to the top, like so. And then right from the center, we're just going to put sort of a triangular shape that almost looks like it's going underneath there. Something like that. Now here's what we're going to do that's a little different. In the one next to it, I'm going to have it going in the opposite direction. And the square or the triangle will go in there, sort of mirroring the other one. And then I'm going to keep rotating back and forth in that way till they're all filled. All right, we have about 1.5 spaces left, so I'm just going to focus on this last space, and then I might do something kind of like a little tangle enhancer at the end there just to finish it off. So I'm going to use my black pen to define this space, but I think maybe put another row of perfs in here. All right, I like to add these just little tangle enhancers here and there. It just adds a little aura here, row of perfs, and that just adds to the whole composition. All right, so I'm going to use my brown pen inside this space. Divide it up one more time into squares. I think I only used the triangles once, but feel free to explore that because the triangles are really fun. All right, so this one is X7 in the primer, and it kind of reminds me of a tangle called Phi-Cops. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to pick a section and I'm going to draw these sort of spokes coming off from right there, that corner. And then from each point I'm going to come down just a hair with a little arced line like that. Everybody see that? And you could leave it like that if you wanted to, but I think I'm going to go to the opposite point and come back to create a little more definition. Got it? All right, so again, like we did in this one up here, I'm gonna do it the opposite way in the mirroring way in the square next to it, okay? If you need a second to kind of figure out what's going on, just watch it a couple times to see. And then you have this kind of pretty flowering thing. So this one is going to go in the opposite way of that one. So I'm going to go to this corner. Sometimes you need to kind of pause to see where you're at. Fun. And then I'm going to go ahead and do that to the rest of these squares. All right, I got those all done, and then when I was done, I went back in and just sort of inked in the background just to add a little bit more definition. So it looks like we just have this space left here, and I think I'm just going to put some thick striping in there with my black pen, but you may think of something else. I just want to put something kind of simple down here, so I'm just going to play with some thick stripes that kind of radiate off the bottom here. I'm going to do that all the way around. All right, so I finished up that last space. We have accomplished filling all of these rows, which was a lot of tangling, because if you think about it, it is equivalent to doing like 3Z tiles almost. So it was fun though, so take your time. And as I said before, you don't have to do the same fragments I did. You could explore totally different ones, or not, whatever you like. So here comes the fun part, or the fun part for me is adding the shading and the highlights. I love doing this part. So I'm going to start with my graphite pencil. And one thing I'm going to say to you guys, mine has sort of been sitting here for a while and dried, but if you just finished yours, you might want to just walk away and take a break and let the ink sort of settle in, because you don't want to be shading over when it's still sort of damp. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my graphite and I'm going to just put a heavy layer of graphite on either side of all of those bands that I put down, or edges to my rows of fragments. So I'm going to go down and do that on each side, just a nice heavy layer, and go all the way down doing that. Okay, so I have my initial layer of graphite down here. As you can see, once I just sort of put a thick layer on either side of every band, and then I went into a few of the tangles and added some other details, like around the well I did a little circling around that orb. On the triangles I've put a little bit on either side of the triangles, and under this I've added a little bit too. And this is just preliminary, just putting down the graphite. Now I'm going to go back in with my tortillon and maybe add a little bit more graphite, just sort of taking my time and figuring out what needs to be done. Okay, so I went through all of that graphite I put down, and I just really carefully sort of invited it into the paper with my tortillon, and as you can see, the results are quite nice. I'm super happy with how things are going. I just love how the graphite sort of melts everything together. And I'm going to take it to another step further here, and you may be totally happy with the way yours is and want to leave it, and that's totally fine. I am going to add a little bit of white charcoal here. And what I like to do is sort of go through some of these bands and make a sort of just a sparkle in the middle. So I'll pick one in here just to show you what I mean. So I start off with almost just a line in the middle, and then using sort of the side of my charcoal pencil, I'm sort of going to blend that to make it a little wider. And I just want you all remember how soft the paper is, so you can't work the paper too much. You sort of got to work quickly and deliberately, and it really could have a nice effect there. The camera sort of accentuates the white, but in real life it isn't that bright. And then take my tortillon and sort of blend it a little bit. Very cool. I guess in that angle you can see it a little bit. Isn't that pretty? So I'm going to go ahead and sort of play with all of them there to do something a little bit like that. Okay, so I went through and added my white charcoal, and as I said, I think the camera sort of reflects the charcoal a little bit more than you see it in real life. But you can sort of add as you like. You can see here in a couple of places I added the charcoal a little bit differently, just to add a little bit of a different detail. So go through and look at the tangles and see what makes sense to each one. And then the last step here we're going to do before we take off, just to add a little bit of festive flair, is I'm going to go ahead and sort of add some gold gel pen, sort of in, you know, little inviting places, just to finish it off and sort of have a little bit of sparkle to it. So take a look at yours and see where you might add a couple of gold things here and there. And then of course sign the back or the front, whichever one makes sense for you, and show us what you've done with your reticulatry. Alright, thanks guys, it's been real fun. See you soon.
Molly had done a couple others that I wanted you to see, and this is the
just
diamond.
So spectacular. Yes.
Isn't that beautiful?
Oh, she had a lot of fun doing these, and so much fun that I think she did even another tree. Oh,
Yeah.
Look at that one. How cool is that? All with wonderful fragments. Hope you guys have a good time with this stuff. And
Thank you for spending 12 days with us. It's been absolutely a thrill, and thank you for everything.
we'll see you next year. Bye.
Have fun.